And welcome back to Hill and Ponton's YouTube live, weekly live. I am attorney Allison Reddick, and I am with.
I'm attorney Ursula Mecabe.
And this is exciting. We have never done a live before, so.
Well, we have, but just not together.
Not together. Sorry, yeah. We've done them. You've seen us, but you've never seen us together. So buckle up. We've got time for about 55 minutes of questions today because I have a conference at 3 p.m. So let's get it started. What is our first question? Okay, MQ. Can you advise of the best plan to get TDIU, individual unemployability, with 70% PTSD? I've been out of work for a year. I want to try and increase my rating to 100%. Should I try to apply for a TDIU and 100% at the same time? So when you are applying for TDIU, you're filing that 8940, you're always filing for the highest benefits possible. So if you're putting PTSD on your 8940 form, which is the form that is used to seek individual unemployability, you're always going for that 100% rating. But getting 100% rating is really hard. I would say, gosh, I don't know, maybe I've had 2% of my clients get 100% for PTSD. It's really hard to get. And if you've been out of work for a year and you can show that you are unemployable due to those mental health symptoms, then absolutely go ahead and file for it. Do you have anything to add, Ursula?
The only thing I'd really add is, when you're looking at 100% for mental health versus TDIU based on a mental health condition, the only real difference when it comes to your benefits is that if you're 100%, you could go back to work. But if your mental health has it so that you are no longer able to work, taking the TDIU is essentially the same thing. You're not treated any differently as a veteran if you are TDIU versus 100%. It's all the same. So it mostly matters on whether or not you plan on going back to work.
Absolutely. And it is hard to get that 100% for the PTSD, but if you have the evidence, look at the diagnostic criteria for it, absolutely go for that 100%, because like Ursula said, it doesn't impede how much money you're able to make. And when you fill out that 8940 form, whatever conditions you put on there, those are the conditions they're going to assess. So if you just want them to look at your PTSD and you have other service connected conditions, don't put them on there. Only put the conditions you want them to assess on there.
All right, this is from HL. I have a disability rating for asthma at 60%. Is it worthwhile trying to file for sleep apnea secondary to PTSD and asthma? So it is not. Asthma and sleep apnea are both respiratory conditions, and VA has a rule on certain conditions. If you have one, you can't be rated. If you have both, you can only be rated for one. And typically it is going to be the one that's going to get you the highest evaluation. So it's not going to be worth it because you're already 60% for the asthma. There is a rule out there that allows for you to, let's say you were only 30% for asthma and you got service connected for the sleep apnea, then you would be bumped up and you would get to the higher level of the sleep apnea. So it would be worth it. In this case, you're not going to get any additional benefits by service connecting the sleep apnea.
Basically, it's pyramiding. If you have the same symptoms, then they say that you can't stack on top of it. So yeah, you're better with sticking with the 60% for asthma, because the highest for, unless you have a, what is it, a BiPAP for the sleep apnea, because then it would be 100% rating. look at the diagnostic criteria for it, right?
Yeah, I think 50% is the highest with the CPAP or BiPAP.
I know there's one that you can get 100% for. I thought it was the BiPAP, but look at the diagnostic criteria. I can look that up as well. Continue. Next question.
You want me to read the next one while you look that up?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. All right, this is Charles Shell. If presently rated at 100% TDIU and SMCS, which is special monthly compensation, then later get rated at scheduled 100%, will veteran lose the SMCS? No, it should not. So SMCS is special monthly compensation based on housebound status, and it's also based on what your ratings are. So not very often do we see people actually granted SMCS based on housebound because that's kind of hard to prove that you're housebound. And typically if you're housebound, you're probably going to be going for a higher level of SMC. But when it comes to SMCS, if you were 100% TDIU for one condition, and then you had other separate conditions rated at 60%, you would get SMCS. Now, whether that 100% is TDIU based on one condition or 100% scheduler, it's the same thing. So you're not going to lose the SMCS. You should continue the SMCS. Now, if you were 100% TDIU with SMCS, and then you were rated at 100% for a completely different condition, let's say 100% TDIU for PTSD, 60% for all these other conditions, and then you come in with 100% for your heart, then you can actually get higher SMCs based on taking half steps and full steps. Super complicated stuff, but the shorter answer is you shouldn't lose the SMCS.
But like she said, that's if you have the IU for one condition with the SMCS, and then you later get scheduled 100%. So let's say you had 70% for PTSD and that gets bumped up to 100, then you would keep it. If you had 60% for your heart, that gets bumped up to 100, then you would keep it. But if it's the 70% from your heart plus 70% for the PTSD plus 60 for your heart plus bilateral radiculopathy, which is getting you up to that 100%, since it's multiple conditions, then you're going to lose it. And then going back to the sleep apnea, they changed the diagnostic criteria. For 100%, it has to be, you have to have a tracheostomy, which a lot of people don't have. That's probably pretty rare. Or chronic respiratory failure with carbon dioxide retention, or cor pulmonale, which has to do with the heart. So it is possible if you do have one of those conditions, then yes, go for the 100% rating. But if it's just the sleep apnea that you have the CPAP or the BiPAP, then there's no point, because 50% is less than the 60% you're already getting for your asthma. Okay. Leander Savoy. Hello, got your book. Thanks. I'm 70% for depression and 40% for loss of use of foot. He has obesity from loss of use of foot, need nexus for hypertension and heart valve replacement. Is that it? Okay. And bypass. Can you please see if you can help me out with this information? Okay, so can you go back to the first part? It was 70% for depression, 40% for loss of use. So yes, you can use obesity as an intermediate step. The VA does not like using that, though. It is possible. What you would have to show is that you developed the depression and the loss of use first, which led to the weight gain and the obesity, which then led to the hypertension and the heart valve replacement and the bypass surgery. If you have medical records lining that up, or if you have a doctor who will support that finding, then yes, you can try to use obesity as an intermediate step, especially with the loss of use of the foot. If you can't use your foot, then you can't really exercise. And if that led to the weight gain and the eventual development of the hypertension and the heart conditions, then absolutely. The hypertension may be hard though. Did you have hypertension before the loss of youth? So it really is the lining up and the chronology of the issues.
Yeah, exactly. I have nothing to add. That was perfect. All right, this is from Happiness. The VA has had my hubby's supplemental claim since June. They have a DBQ IMO 4130. I'm assuming that's 4138, which is a statement in support of claim. Pictures, plenty to rate his claims. They requested new CMPs for the second time. Can we write a 4138 to look at evidence on file already, or bring his DBQs and hand them over? Then there's a regulation. Also, they use the new intent to file date instead of the continuous pursuit date. I wrote a 4138 and called about it too. Thoughts? Okay, so there's a couple of parts in this. So let's start with the first one. If you could go back to the beginning. So having the supplemental claim since June, we're now in November. That's not a ridiculous amount of time for them to be holding it. I would feel comfortable with that. It doesn't seem like right now things are lagging, and especially if they're requesting new exams, it means that they are working on it. Having CMPs requested for the second time. So it looks like you've got all this evidence in there and they need another CMP. The thing is, that means that there's either something missing that they want one of their doctors to talk about, even if you have everything in there. If they request an exam, they think that they need it. And your best bet is to go to those exams. They may have needed clarification. Maybe the first exams that they got weren't adequate. There was something missing from them, and they've sent it back to someone else or to the same person to say, hey, we didn't get an answer on this, or clarify this for me. So I wouldn't be too worried about that. They should be looking at all the evidence, the DBQs, the IMOs, all of that stuff. And when you do get your rating decision, make sure that you read it. So you'll have like the first page, which is like the notification. And then on the page where there's the VA seal, they'll tell you all the evidence that they used to make their determination. And you're going to want to go through the list of evidence there and make sure that that IMO, the DBQs, the pictures were reviewed. And if they weren't, and you don't get a favorable decision, you can file that higher level review and say, look, these things weren't looked at. So I don't know that I would say to VA, I mean, it doesn't hurt. And, you know, Allison, maybe you can chime in on this. It doesn't hurt to write a 4138, but I don't think it helps too much either. They're going to look.
Yeah, I agree.
Next section. Wait, I haven't read that. As far as the intent to file goes, we see this a lot with AMA, where when you're filing 0995s and you're continuously pursuing it and going higher level review, they do mess up the dates a lot. They a lot of times will do it from a new intent to file, or they'll say it's from a supplemental claim from 6 months ago instead of the ones that the same claim you've been filing for the last 2 years. So if you get it granted and they use the incorrect date for the effective date, just file a higher level review to that and say, look, this is my actual date of claim. I filed a claim here. This was the decision. I filed a supplemental, and just line it out for them, higher level review, and it should get fixed there. On the A&M form.
Yeah, it's fine. A lot of times they'll combine TBI and PTSD. That's how they do it now. Okay, Lonnie Brinson, BVA question. If I move from the hearing lane to the evidence or direct review lane, will that shorten the lifetime waiting period? It depends. If you generally, yes, it should, but you have to realize that how long have you been waiting in the hearing lane? Have you been sitting there for 2 years, 3 years? Then I wouldn't move, because the evidence lane right now is, oh gosh, how many? At least 3+ years. The direct lane is 2+ years. But they are starting to get through them as they phase out legacy, which they are getting to the end of it. Then maybe we'll see that the lanes are more to the time that they're supposed to be. But right now, they're all pretty long. If you just filed it and you have the opportunity, which I would assume that's where you are, as you just filed in the hearing lane and you're still within the appellate period, then yeah, I would switch to evidence lane if you wanted to file new evidence with it, or if you were going in for direct view and you didn't have any evidence to submit, then switching to the direct lane. For me, the only reason you would need a hearing is if it's something physical, like seeing burns or loss of, like severe loss of use, things that the judge seeing it may have an effect on it. But if it's something like service connection for mental health or a heart condition, things like that, those can be easily done based off of the evidence of record. But that's also if you have an argument letter or something to submit. But right now, also, if you're above 75 or older, then you want to stay where you are, because you're going to be expedited regardless. But where we are now is they're really, really, really far behind. I have not seen an increase or a decrease in time to wait. I have been seeing some direct decisions from 2021. I've been seeing some evidence lane from 2021. I'm seeing them start to move, but they have a long way to go. What do you think, Ursula?
I agree. It just depends on how long you've been sitting there. And you only have a certain amount of time to switch lanes. So if you're outside of that time, something you could try to do is waive the hearing and just say, look, I don't want the hearing. I waive it. Here's the evidence that I have, because you have 90 days from the day you waive the hearing to submit your evidence, and just saying, I want to make a decision as soon as possible. If you've been there for more than a year, that would be my only advice.
Or to try a reason to expedite, whether that be your age, 75 or older, health expedite if you're terminal, if you have evidence of like recent hospitalization for like suicidal ideation in your record, or financial, if your house is being foreclosed on, if you are past due in your mortgage, if you can't keep your electricity, your basic life necessities, if you're homeless, if they see in your file that you're homeless, they'll definitely expedite that. So if you need proof that you are homeless, go to the VA, talk to a social worker, have them put it in your file, and then that's easy, something that you can submit. I just had that done like last week, and within a week it's been put as advanced on the docket.
I didn't know you could do that. That actually makes really good sense.
Yeah, because these vets, they're homeless and they're like, I don't have evidence that I'm homeless. So I say, go to a social worker at the VA, talk to them, and they'll put in their file that they're homeless. And then we take that from their VA records and file it as an expedite.
Smart. All right. Give me my damn money, sport picks. I have a case at BVA based on negative entry physical, and VA denied the claim based on pre-existing conditions. I was medically separated. If I file a Q based on presumption of soundness misapplied, what are my chances to win? Okay, so it's first off, a Q is really, really difficult to prove. And typically you want to use a Q when you need to reopen a claim from a while ago, because there was an error that was so egregious that if Allison and I and my mom looked at it, we would all go, that doesn't make any sense. And that's a very hard thing to prove. It cues, I know people are like, oh, that was a mistake. It may have been a mistake, but it may not have been a Q claim. It sounds like your case is still on appeal because it's at the BVA, which means that asserting a Q now isn't going to help you get that service connection based on a pre-existing condition. But I do think that if you had a negative entry physical and then they said it was a pre-existing condition, that is a misapplication of the presumption of soundness. It seems like that to me. And that is actually just the argument, is the presumption of soundness. Now, if they're saying that, well, we think that you had that before, then you've got the presumption of aggravation. And they're very similar doctrines, but different. So if they came back and said, well, actually, you had that condition before, and so we're going to deny service connection. If your condition was aggravated in service, and especially if you were medically separated for it, I think you've got two ways and two theories to bring up there. And I would apply both of those, and you don't need to know the nitty gritty of it. If you have an advocate, they should, be doing those things for you. But for you, if you are by yourself out there trying to do this, just write a letter to them and saying, I don't know which one this is, but this is what it is. And here you go. So that's my thoughts on it.
I think you also have to consider, okay, the negative physical exam, was it because it was something that is congenital? Like if it's a congenital heart defect, or if it's like some types of peripheral neuropathy or congenital, that still doesn't throw out your case. All you have to show is that it is something that would have worsened past the normal course of the disease because of your time in service. So because of that physical activity or because of an injury or something like that, that's another way to get around that as well. IB King. Okay. 70% PTSD to include major depressive disorder, which is static. TDIU, individual unemployability, not inferred. Filed TDIU, denied. Appealed to HLR, denied. File supplemental claim with new and relevant evidence. Vocational assessment report. CMP exam scheduled. What should I expect? Well, you are going the course that is pretty normal. That's usually how it goes, is that you get schedulally qualified and they don't infer it when they should. And so you appealed it and then they still deny it. And then you go back with the new evidence. So where you are now is you're in supplemental with that vocational expert report. Now you have to realize with the supplemental, you're going back to the lowest person reviewing your case. So they may grant it or they may deny it. Now, if it was me and you're not advanced on the docket, I'm going to go HLR again if they deny it, because that's someone higher up looking at it. I would ask for an informal conference and discuss that vocational expert report with them, because that's really your evidence there. So it may get denied again, but that doesn't mean that it's right. It's someone who probably isn't thoroughly reviewing the file. And then with that HLR, you can have it reviewed again. If it's still denied, then you have to go up to the board. You can add more evidence, but if you have a strong vocational expert report, that should be enough evidence, in my opinion.
Yep. That's exactly right. All right. Reginald McDuffie. I initially put in a claim for shortness of breath, went to CMP and was told I need more tests done. After multiple tests, I found out I had asthma. I wrote a personal statement and sent diagnosis with a letter. The VA denied my shortness of breath claim. I'm already service connected under the PACT Act, and asthma is a presumptive condition. Is that the end of it? Yes, so I I can see that if the shortness of breath was caused by the asthma and you're already service connected for asthma, it makes sense that you would be denied shortness of breath because it's the same claim. Sometimes shortness of breath, when you claim shortness of breath, it could be from a heart condition that's later diagnosed. And so it depends on what that cause of shortness of breath is, but you can't get service connected for shortness of breath and asthma, which you already are. You may be able to get an increased rating if your asthma has progressed and your symptoms are worse, but you're not going to get service connected for both.
Yeah, either you can go and get a new pulmonary function test on your own, which is how they rate the asthma, or you can write a 4138 and say, file a supplemental claim and say, my symptoms have worsened. I feel I need an increase for asthma, and see if they'll give you a new CMP exam. X Jarhead 57. I was awarded 20% for type 2 diabetes secondary to toxic exposure. I have hypertension. The CMP doctor said has a direct connection to diabetes. I also have 2 stents and sleep apnea. Is it worth stabbing the bear? I got 100% this year. I was thinking for my wife, if I died, most of my disabilities are musculoskeletal. I wouldn't. If you're at 100%, I would leave it. Can you go back to the first part? I would leave it where you are. So did you have hypertension before you were diagnosed with the diabetes? Because that can get sticky. If you were definitely diagnosed and the doctor says, and you have the report that says it has a direct connection to DM2, yeah, absolutely, you can file for that. But you're at 100% and you're going in and having them look at your file. What do you think, Ursula?
So I would probably agree with Allison. Like, there's no reason to stab the bear or poke the bear or whatever. And part of that is like hypertension isn't going to get you rated anything, maybe 0%, 10%. And if you had open claims and you weren't at 100 yet, I would try to service connect the hypertension even at 0% to set up for things like DIC. But if you don't have open claims, and it's not going to be worth it unless also you could get your heart up to at least a 6, like, no, I wouldn't do it. But to make you feel better, let's say, you end up dying of a heart attack because of the diabetes, like the hypertension in your heart. Your wife can come in at any point and raise her own theory of entitlement for DIC benefits. So she can come in and say, well, look, yes, he was service connected for diabetes, and the diabetes caused the hypertension, which caused these heart issues, and she can get service connected that way. So it doesn't mean that you not doing this now is going to stop her from being able to do it, because she can raise that on her own. So,
and I feel like just because you get the hypertension connected, most likely you're going to pass away from something that was caused by the hypertension. So unless the hypertension is listed on your cause of death, most likely it's not going to be on the death certificate. Then she's still going to have to go through getting that heart or something else connected anyways. So God forbid if that were to happen, I would send her over to us, help her out. But at this point, I think we both agree, leave it alone, keep your 100%, because going in gives them reason to look for things to reduce for no reason. And if you're at 100%, leave it alone. But know that if you do pass away from something that's related to the hypertension, that she can go in with her own claim and still get those DIC benefits.
You made me think of something. Keep in mind too, I'm looking at your picture over here. You don't look too old, but as you get older, with a lot of if you're 100% for mostly musculoskeletal things, you may down the line end up having some issues with getting dressed and needing help and things like that. So you may have additional benefits like aid and attendance that you could go for when you qualify for those. And at that point, when you're needing the help of someone else and you've already opened up for VA to look at you, you could throw in a hypertension claim there. But I wouldn't do it right now. Yeah. You're welcome. Is that Uriel? Uriel Reicher, for sure. My mom applied for DIC in 86, was denied and approved for survivor pension, but made too much. In 96, she began to collect survivor's pension until was discontinued in 2017 because she began collecting Social Security in 2015. In 2023, I reapplied for DIC in 2023, and a TARA memo was completed confirming my father's exposure. If the VA approves a new claim for DIC, how far back will her back pay be extended to? Would I just readjust previous pension payments if death is service connected? Will they go back to the original application the month after his death in 1986? That is a loaded question because it depends. Typically, it's done from the date of the application for the DIC or the date of death if it's within a year. But it sounds like this one would have lapsed and there wasn't continuous appealing for the DIC. So whenever that new application was filed. But depending on the veteran service, where they served, whether they fall under the Survivors PACT Act claims or under NEMR or things like that, you might be able to get it all the way back. So I can't answer that question without knowing more circumstances of the service.
Channel of Love, Hope, and Faith. Was just awarded 100% permanent and total, 100% mental health, 50% headaches, 10% tinnitus. Before the last rating, I was awarded 100% GIRD for esophageal cancer. Rating is still in place. Scheduled for RFE. Cancer is gone now. With the reexamination, will they open up all or just the GIRD part? VA medical records show no cancer. Not sure why they still have 100% GIRD because of cancer. Should have permanent, 100% permanent and total opened, I call them. So basically, they'll keep that 100% for the esophageal cancer. It depends on the type of cancer, but once you are in remission, sometimes it's 6 months usually, then they will reassess because of the cancer. You may have residual issues, whether you have swallowing issues, whether you have gastrointestinal reflux, all of those other issues, that's what they're going to be considered. It will not reopen all of your other conditions. All of your other conditions should be fine. It's just since they're reducing you from that 100%, they have to reassess now for any residual issues. You will have to go for an examination, but it won't affect your permanent and total for the mental health and the headaches and all of that. It's just reassessing the residual issues from that cancer because they are reducing that rating. They have to give you a new rating for that. If you don't have any residual issues, they're going to give you a 0%. And move on. It's not going to affect your rating since you have the permanent and total from the mental health and all the other ratings.
And if you don't show up to the exam that they did to reevaluate the cancer, they'll just reduce you to 0. They'll just go through with a reduction without any examination. So definitely do go to that exam. Happiness. Doing a supplemental claim for the VHA caregiver program. Will they back pay to original claim date within the 1 year continuous? They are supposed to. The caregiver program is a hot mess express. Like they don't know what's going on with it. You need to make sure you submit new and relevant evidence for the supplemental claim. There needs to be something. But yes, they're supposed to go back to that original claim, just like the other ones if you keep appealing. I have not had any success, Allison, I don't know if you have at all, through the supplemental claim lane, getting a grant.
Yeah, I had one. I've had one denied, and remember, I think the first one we filed was in 2021 or 2022. I've had two. I've had one in HLR, which was denied, but it was just to go from the higher step, since there's two steps. And then I've had one supplemental that was granted for the caregiver. So it is possible. Oh, Margarita, this is your question that you wanted.
All right. I served at Fort McClellan for basic training. VA, you have been diagnosed with a disability, but neither occurred in nor was caused by service. How can I show connection to service? So I wanted to read this one off because we do a lot of Fort McClellan claims. I know, Allison, your team does as well. And Fort McClellan's one of those bases that has some special circumstances if you served at a certain time. But I think the broad question here is, how do I show a connection to service if you have a diagnosed disability? You have to do it through a couple of ways. Either directly, you had something happen in service that is linked to it, and you can show a diagnosis in service and one now, and continuity of the symptoms. Secondary service connection, all of that, but presumptive service connection, you just have to show them. But with Fort McClellan, one of the big things, and depending on the disability, like if it's one of the disabilities like hypertension, Parkinson's, certain cancers, diabetes, heart conditions, we know that there were a lot of chemicals on the base. And so if you can prove that you were exposed to those chemicals and those chemicals then caused your disabilities, then you could be able to get its service connection. So look at all of the ways possible. This is a very broad question. I don't know what the disabilities were or when you served, so it's hard to tell, but there were some exposures there that may have contributed.
Also, try to get a copy of your claims file and find your TARA, the Toxic Exposure Risk Assessment. Some of them have really good information on them and will say, like, if you were in military police at Fort McClellan and you had these exposures, or you had this MOS and you had these exposures, some of them are good and you can build off of that, because sometimes they'll give you the exposures but then still deny it because, again, the people who don't really have a lot of experience making those initial decisions. And then from there, you can build a case. But a lot of times those Fort McClellan cases probably going to have to go to the board, but you need to build off of the information you have. It really depends on where you served in the base, what your duties were, where you were located, to give more information. But it's definitely possible. I feel like eventually they're going to have to do presumption for Fort McClellan. I don't know if that's going to take 5 years, 10 years, but more and more information is coming out about it, and more people are getting service connected for it. So that's what I would hope eventually.
I hope so too, but I think so many people went through Fort McClellan. I think VA would just go bankrupt because they have so many claims they would have to pay. So they're making veterans fight them.
But if it was just like, if you were in military police, give them, something like that, where it's a little easier, where that they were exposed. Maybe I'm just
those are great dreams.
A hoper
looking into the future.
Yeah,
I see Margarita's comment on cancer and diabetes. So I mean, I would definitely, if you don't already have an advocate that knows about Fort McClellan and has evidence to submit, you may want to go the route of finding someone who's familiar with that base, especially for cancer and diabetes. Good luck.
Uriel Reicher again, on my own claim. Thank you for your questions, of course. On my own claim for DIC, the VA got an ACE exam done to determine if death was connected to service. However, the examiner failed to recognize any of the secondary service-connected conditions from being claimed. The vet had strep in service months after discharge. The vet was diagnosed with post-strep glomerular nephritis. It's got to do with your kidneys and hypertension. Years later, hypertension led to type 2 diabetes and hypertensive heart disease. Those service-connected conditions made their COVID fatal and led to death. But the examiner only opined that the strep death from COVID. I submitted a positive medical opinion, I'm assuming. Yeah, so the ACE exams, they're supposed to review the whole file. That doesn't necessarily mean that they did. Since the service-connected condition, opinion, what else should I do? If that was a supplemental or original claim or a supplemental claim at the rating board, I would definitely go a higher level review to have and ask for an informal conference to have someone actually look at that specific medical opinion that you provided. That happens way more than it should, where they will just look at the service records, they'll see one thing and they'll make an opinion on that, and they won't make a comment on anything else. That could be because that's what the exam request instructions asked and they limited their opinion to that, or they just didn't do a thorough assessment of it. But definitely does seem like that there is a claim there, especially if they are service connected for those other conditions and you have a nexus opinion supporting it. I would definitely do a higher level review. And then from there, if you need to go to the board, you may have to go to the board.
Yeah, a lot of times they don't ask the right questions to the examiner. Like they don't put all the pieces together. And that had a lot of steps from service, right? And all they said was service to this, and they forgot all that middle part. And when VA poses that question to the examiners, they just answer what's being asked. And so, and I don't know why they don't look a little deeper into it and actually, look and make a medical judgment, because that's what they're being asked to do. They just answer the question in the negative. And we see it a lot, and it's just going to take you putting that in front of someone and explaining it until you get the right opinion. And an ACE exam, I think, is appropriate for a DIC claim for sure. An ACE exam is just a record review. Yeah, you're just going to have to line it out for them, and you may have to do it several times, unfortunately.
And I wanted to comment, higher level review is like 50-50. There are some really, really good higher level review people, and there are some that are really, really bad, and they're just going to rubber stamp deny it. Like, don't give up based off of that. Either continue on the hamster wheel. Unfortunately, do a supplemental. If you have more, go back to higher level review. Maybe you'll get someone good. Or if it's something more complex, you're going to have to go up to the board and unfortunately wait. Hopefully they'll get caught up at some point, but it is going to take time, but it should be connected if the evidence supports it.
Woo! Give me my damn money. Sport Pig. VA denied my original claim. We already did that one.
Yeah.
J Monk, 104. I was denied of lower back strain. VA states that I had lower back problems prior to joining the military based on MEPS exam form. However, the check mark in the form was a mistake. You can clearly see that I had crossed it out along with my initials and date next to it. My military medical records show I had 2 complaints of back problems during my 20 plus years in service. How do I convey to the VA that the back problems have gotten worse as the years progress due to military activities, such as ruck marches wearing 25 plus pounds gear for 20 years. Currently have a diagnosis of lower back degenerative and have gone through physical therapy for it. This goes back to both the presumption of soundness and, presumption of aggravation. You're just going to have to, the biggest thing I see in back condition claims is even if you have these incidents in service that are documented, the back doesn't start to give you a whole lot of issues for many years to come. And it's really showing the continuity of the symptoms, not the treatment, but the symptoms. So that can be done through statements. So you can say, look, you can even make the statement of, you can tell I crossed this out. I didn't have any back problems. It was wrong. You can clearly see that. But then I went in and I had these back issues and I'd never had them before. And then outline your back problems up until the point you started seeing someone or when it started to get really bad. So that way they can say, okay, there is this link, there's continuity of symptomology, and now you have this back condition, provided you didn't get into a car accident 5 years ago and hurt your back. So you have to also show that there was nothing in between there that could have caused these issues. And then you really have to rely on at least as likely as not. Because if there's nothing that intervened, there's no other reason that you would have these back problems. So you are just going to have to line it out just like that. You may need to get a medical opinion from an orthopedic doctor. I find those to be better than chiropractors, but chiropractors can also do those types of opinions. But I think a medical doctor, orthopedist has a little better credentials, I guess, would be my thing.
I would also say, if someone knew you before you went into service and they can cooperate and support, yeah, he never had back issues, he was an athlete, things like that, that will help clear up that issue. And I think definitely you're going to need a medical opinion. A lot of times they'll say that back issues are due to age. So you're going to need a medical expert to help you support and show that that continuity of treatment and symptoms are from the initial injury and service. Also, what was your MOS? What were your duties in service? If you're having to pick up heavy things or if you had an office job, those are going to be two different things. If you're a mechanic and you're bending over and you're underneath planes and you're lifting heavy things, that's going to be more likely to support that the back injury came from that, rather than if you're in an office all day. So think about that too. Okay, we will do 2 more questions before we have to get out of here and get back to work. Mike Allen, is it true that now limits back pay to only 1 year? No. Is the AMA stricter with how you can appeal things? Yes, but no. If you have open claim, if you've continuously appealed things, then you can get it back to as far as you continuously appealed it. There is a regulation where you can try to get an additional year of back pay prior to it if there is evidence of an increase, but no, back pay isn't. I haven't heard that of you.
No, I'm pretty sure we would have heard about that.
Yeah, we would probably be out of jobs.
Yeah.
If that were the case, because we're always trying to get you as much back pay as possible.
Yeah. PJ Rock. I got TDIU in June of 2003 based on 60% for back and 50% for depression. In the same rating letter, my depression increased to 70% with an effective date of January 4th. CMP exam on 1/24. I asked to shift my TDIU to be based solely on my 70% depression for SMCS, and it was granted. I used my filing date and not my 1/4 date for back pay. Do they owe me back to the 1-4 C&P, which stated depression made me TDIU. All right, go back, let me look at the dates. Go to the first one, please. So if you were at 50, so the TDIU, it looks like from June 3rd would be based on both the back and the depression. At that point, you weren't at the scheduler rating for depression to be rated at TDIU alone. So you should be TDIU. Your SMCS would be based on the date that they increased your effective date to 70% and then granted the TDIU based on that. So you should be at January 4th for SMCS. Yeah. I was also granted SMCK with an effective date of 1/24, but my VA medical record shows ED diagnosis in 2006. Should that SMCS be backdated to 2006? No, it doesn't matter when your record shows the diagnosis. It matters when you filed the claim or when your claim was originally filed.
Okay. That is all the time we have for today. We appreciate you coming and watching and asking questions. If there are specific topics that you want videos on or have more questions about, just send them in and we will try to get to them, whether it be in a live or in the other videos that we produce. We appreciate your time. We hope everyone has a great rest of their day. Thank you so much.
Thank you.